Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Musicians Podcast. I'm excited to be back, doing more interviews. Before we get into it, I'll just be honest, it is so hard to put podcasts out right now. I don't know. Everything's stressful, everything's crazy in the world, and I'm doing the best I can. And I'm putting them out when I feel like it, and I feel good about that. The algorithm does not like that. But I gotta do what's best for me. I've been practicing, shedding, learning, growing, working at Costco, getting by, and I'm ready for this now. Another thing I've been doing, podcast adjacent, is working on thehappymusicians.com. The website, I think, is really elegant and beautiful and is a fun little oasis on the internet that is ad-free and a pleasant experience to visit. I hope you will. I've been blogging a lot on there recently, which has been a great way for me to start to work out some of the thoughts I have from what I've got from these interviews. And I think it's valuable. I hope you check it out and let me know what you think when you do. The other thing that's on there is a new newsletter, which is going to come out every 2 weeks, and it will be spam-free, hassle-free, and it's the best way that I can think of to interact with you as my audience in a meaningful and direct way. It's infuriating to have to go through social media platforms that make it so hard to connect with people, and then if you do, you have to pay them for your audience to even see it because the algorithm doesn't show it to you. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll know right away, in a personal way, about all the content I'm putting out. And I really think that's a more meaningful way for us to engage. Okay, that's all I got. Now for this week's episode. So, the guest this week is Steve Houghton, who is an internationally renowned jazz drummer, percussionist, educator, clinician, and author. And he wears a lot of hats, but the one I'm most proud of and familiar with is as personal teacher and mentor. He was my professor at IU for my undergrad, and he put up with a very young and confused Tanner trying to figure things out. And I felt like I showed up to school with a very shallow connection with music, and he helped me find a lot of depth and meaning. And I can only say good things about Steve, honestly. It was amazing to work with him, and I'm really excited now to be able to share his thoughts with you all. In our conversation, Steve shares how he thinks you can have a meaningful and impactful career as a teacher. We also talk about what universities can do to make it easier for teachers and more valuable for students. And it was interesting, just talking about meaning and purpose. Steve and I are from different generations and approach that topic very differently. And it was fun for me to hear his perspective on that and see how it compares, I think, to the general way that younger people are approaching that issue. We also talk about ECM music, small victories, and the importance of projects and playing with your friends. Yeah, baby. I'm excited to share this with you. Steve, congratulations on your retirement this past fall. You achieved something beautiful at IU, and I was so happy to be a part of it. Thanks for being here this week, and please help me welcome Steve Houghton.
Steve Houghton, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
It's great to hook up with you.
Yeah, this is super special for me. Obviously you were a huge mentor for me and wildly formative for my whole experience at IU and learning how to start down this path. And I pepper sprayed you with endless questions for forever. And at first when I reached out to you to do this, I was thinking, it's awesome. He gave me so much advice and it'd be great to give advice for other students. But then the idea I had instead was, you've been a teacher for so long, and I'd really love to just get your thoughts about teaching and share that information with other people trying to become teachers. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is something that I appreciate about your style of teaching. And I feel like you aren't afraid to just have opinions about things. And one thing I've noticed, especially with guest clinicians and stuff, and I feel like in music in general lately, is this commitment to any opinion's valid. This is just how I feel. And people qualifying their opinions to the point of never saying anything and making a stance on stuff. And I wonder if that's something you notice and if it's something that you have thought about or struggled in the past about like I just need to be more definitive because I felt like my time with you was like if you want to like this is how you play a shuffle. You want to sound like Evan, like this is how you do that. And for me, that was awesome.
Well, no, I've never struggled with that. Shouldn't surprise you.
Right.
No, early on, my first clinic was with Woody Herman,
Okay.
and we were college kids. We were like 24, and so we got up in front of these junior high and high school kids, but I was with Woody Herman, a nice band, and we had to really try to teach them in a short amount of time, 45 minutes, how to sound better as a rhythm section. So very early on, so this was like 40 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
we all learned, it was Lau Mays, by the way.
Yeah.
We learned how to really put our thoughts into kind of a quick form where we could see results very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, that was the seed of my teaching. And I call it, well, you know what I call it. I call it blue collar teaching, and I call it small victories.
Yeah.
And so all of that's tied together, but at the crux of it all is delivering information that's not insulting, that goes right to the heart of the matter, where I know if they do some of my suggestions, they will sound better.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly.
Right.
And my suggestions are, it's not that I'm a genius. My suggestions are very simply that in my experience, I know this works.
Yeah.
And in my experience, after hearing it back on recordings or hearing input from piano players, bass players, lead trumpet players, conductors, I know that these ideas work. Now, are there other ways to do things? Well, of course there are. But I most everything I teach, I plant the flag and give the student some ideas that I know at least will work.
Mm-hmm.
And where they want to take it, that's always open ended,
Right. Well, I guess
So
I appreciate that you understand that there's other ways to do it, but I feel like especially for students who are just starting out, if you present it like, well, here's one way to do it, but keep in mind you could do it any other way, and like this is just my opinion. Like, how do you act? Like, how is that actionable? I feel like it leads to so
yeah,
much indecision. Whereas, as a teacher, if you're just like, at least just try it with conviction, like this is what you should do. Eventually, that student has like self agency. They could decide not to do it in the future, but at least you shared what was true to you in the moment, right?
yeah. And part of this, and it's been this way the whole time, when I sit in with a junior high school band or a high school band, or demonstrate something in a lesson, or sit in with a college band during a rehearsal, the modeling is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the modeling I do um, demonstrates usually pretty clearly what I'm trying to get across. And the player and the band around it very quickly can sense a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's not just saying something. I think for me, it's always been modeling it and letting the player and the ensemble hear the difference.
Yeah.
And you guys joke about it. What did I do different than you?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the Houghton power question is after you like step on the throne for us and play, and it's like exponentially more powerful and moving, and then you just get off and you're like, so what did I do differently? I mean, it's which as a student, it's like, well, everything, but making forcing us to come up with the answer, I felt like
that's
was really rewarding.
that's huge. I mean, I could say do this, do this, do this, and this, but that's, if you think back, that's not quite how it went down.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest, well, change this and change this. then I would model it, and then I would make the student or require the student to break it down so they know exactly all the elements that made it sound different. And I'd like to think, after 30 years of teaching, that those situations weren't insulting. They may have been a little earth shattering or made you feel for a moment like, crap, I'm not doing it right at all. But I think you understood that my whole point was to give it to you straight and have you repair it or fix it quickly, so the next rehearsal you go into, you're going to kick ass.
Yeah.
That was my whole point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also feel like you imparted this to me on how that I've just been conceptualizing music, is that you do break it down into concepts and get to the point where like you understand mechanically and theoretically and just like on an energy level what's going on. And I feel like, and you've talked about this, it takes a lot of work to do that. But for me, I feel like music is really scary almost, or what, like if you don't define it, it has so much power over you of this. Maybe it's like the illusion of genius. Like, well, like obviously Elvin is a genius. And it's easy to say like, well, I could never sound like that because you just leave it there. But you can go the next level and really take the time to understand what's happening. And then that power of, you give power to like the music part of it when you lie about genius, but you can utilize that if you take the time to understand it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that Elvin would say he's a genius.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've met Elvin, but we weren't buds. But he's certainly one of my heroes.
Right.
But I think Elvin would just say, "I'm playing the music, and I'm playing what I hear and think the John Coltrane band needs." And planted his flag, did what he did, and made that band what it was. With me, I just I just want the music to sound better. And as you mentioned concept, there are plenty of great teachers out there. But there are a lot of teachers who spend a whole lot more time on technique than concept. I would hope that all my students at this point know that I was rooted in concept. I'm not going to give you an Elvin Jones beat. That's ridiculous. But I can show you some elements of what I think his playing consists of, but it's worthless without the music. So we have to surround it with music. And, with Elvin, that's crystal clear. With ECM music, that's crystal clear. So luckily, my teaching has, with great students and in a school like IU, my teaching was able to spend a lot of time on conceptual things. How does the music work? How does the music flow? How does the bass player work? How does the piano and the drums function together? To me, that's where I want to spend my time, and that's what I want the student to understand. If you review your 4 years, we talked about technical issues, but many more issues were dealing with harmonic rhythm, intensity levels, the intensity grid, piano bass hookups, piano drum hookups, and that's the element of jazz music making that I think really turns it from someone who has good chops to someone who really gets the music.
Yeah.
So when you say that some of this music is so powerful that you're fearful of it, or however you put it, yeah, the first time I heard some Coltrane, it was like, holy crap, this scares me, this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It seems so all powerful. But the minute or ECM, it's like, whoa, where's the bar line? Oh my God. But the minute you sit down and suss out what the music entails and get a sense of the phrasing, then everything starts to take shape. So that's kind of where I live. And other teachers, they don't all subscribe to that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one little element of my teaching.
Right. Well, and I guess what I meant to say, I didn't word it very well, but was that until I think you define that concept for yourself, you can almost just be paralyzed by the power of the music, but you can instead be empowered by the music once you understand the concept and you can like
Absolutely.
channel it, And maybe just for example, for like people who haven't been your student before, like how would you describe the ECM concept?
Well, again, I'd have to have some music right handy to model, but
Oh, sure, yeah.
the ECM concept, um, my kind of go-to definition that I developed, I think back with Lyle, is straight eighth note improvised music,
Mm-hmm.
which I think that's a pretty good little stock definition of the concept, meaning that it's not spang spang a lang, it's not backbeat, it's not Latin, but the minute I say, straight eighth note improvised music, then we start talking about mixing it all up and putting in all the hybrids.
Yeah.
And like any good ECM track, it may have different elements in it, like boogaloo, like Brazilian,
Mm-hmm.
like wide open, like broken. So the term ECM over time, over 40 years now, has really grown to include all sorts of things. But I think at its root, when it started, it really stood for transparency. I think it stood for elegance. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the early music was just crystal clear, beautiful cymbal work, piano sounds to die for, big long bass sounds, guitar sounds with lots of reverb. To me, that's my soundscape for ECM.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of not amused me, but it kind of surprised me in my later years of teaching, where some student would say, "Oh, this is an ECM thing." And I'm not sure why they would call it an ECM thing, because it sounded like fusion to me. Just it had more edges to it, and it had some backbeat to it, and I wouldn't necessarily call it transparent.
Yeah.
So now we get into what is what. I
Right.
mean, that's always tough. But for me, and to answer your question, it was that early definition, that soundscape in my mind of transparency, elegance, which then immediately means you better have some beautiful cymbals.
Mm. And a flat ride.
And a flat ride. You can't go in there with a bunch of junk. And and your concept then has to be very wide open. And then we come into the band eighth note and the grid and all those wonderful things that I don't think I clarified all those 30 years ago. But now, as I teach ECM music with students, and not just drum students, any student, it's all about the grid, the band eighth note, the no bar line, the transparency, the elegance, the phrasing, the harmonic rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
So uh,
No, that's great.
it's quite a genre. I find it very compelling,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a lot of fun to teach and to play.
Yeah,
I think it's my favorite style.
I like it. Definitely. I've heard you throw down on it. a number of times. You had mentioned small victories a bit ago, and I'm hoping you could touch on that again, because I know that was something that was really helpful for me when I was with you.
Yeah, I think a small victory. I saw this again. I saw this right back when I did clinics with Woody Herman with junior high school kids. If I could give them the right information in literally 1 or 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and if they could make the change and actually play a bossa nova or a cheater bossa and sound like good, not fall apart, at least learn something and make the band or the music work, they would always walk away just feeling, yeah, I kicked ass,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a little kid. So I thought, well, that's nice. He went away not embarrassed because he didn't know a bossa. He went away feeling good that he learned a bossa in 60 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took that seed and kept building on it year after year. And at a school like IU, it would find, well, let's back up just a second. I taught at PIT, Percussion Institute, for many years, 10 years maybe. And the small victories there were, I used to run their big band.
Okay.
And the students would sit in and play their big band chart.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just stressed out. And they only got one shot: sit down and play Groovin' Hard, or sit down and play what. And so it was a full big band of LA guys.
Mm-hmm.
So when these guys, it was a big experience. I've talked to them over the years. When they sat in that chair and they pulled it off with a lot of guidance along the way, and me playing some time with them as we go and this and that, they got off there feeling like $1,000,000. And it made their week. It made their whatever. They felt a new level of confidence. So taking that to IU, small victories started to really fan out, where it can be a small big victory can be playing a transcription in your lesson where you finally nail it and you actually do sound like Max Roach or somebody
Mm-hmm.
with the correct sound and touch, or in a rehearsal where you totally nail it and everyone's coming up to you, yeah, or in a big band concert where you actually do everything right, or most everything right.
Mm-hmm.
You come away from that concert, that's a large victory. But it was just those situations where they're all confidence builders, and I really utilize confidence builders quite a bit
Mm-hmm.
to encourage the student that that's progress. Sometimes it's hard for students to, yourself included. I think you mentioned it maybe in your second year, but
Mm-hmm.
all the students go, "Am I really getting better?" Because it's hard to see
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah, from your perspective.
Yeah, and so because I don't sit there and say, "Hey, man, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good," and I don't say you're getting better, better, better. It happens another way, where all of a sudden a small victory happens where you totally nail it, whether it's be Latin band or a combo concert or a lobby concert, where you totally did the job.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear from me on that for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that is a small victory or a large victory where you walk away from that with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And the old Packer coach, bless his heart, Mike McCarthy, he says, yeah, we build on these small victories. He didn't use that same term, but he said, no, his thing was, we build on success.
Mm-hmm.
That was his thing.
Yeah.
He didn't have my cool thing.
Right.
But
He's been stealing your lingo.
but he says we build on our successes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So if they have a win and they take all the good things they've done and they build on the success. So this is a little bit of the same thing. But for me, at the end of the day, it's all about confidence building.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the student or the player to really know that they nailed it and feel good about it because they worked really hard on it.
Yeah. And well, yeah, I think it was always really impactful for you to point those out, because even when you finish up a big band concert, even if I felt like I played well, I could still be thinking about like the few things that went wrong or whatever, or immediately worried about what other obligations I have coming up. And it was very valuable to take the time to reflect on that the thing that I'm going to school for and working towards, I actually did, and it went well. And
Yes.
you have to celebrate that when it happens. And I think another big part of that kind of self-reflection came in like the end of semester reports that you had us doing.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's something that I don't know many other teachers who do that.
mhm.
Michael Spiro did kind of a journal, which I think it had a different purpose, but mine was purpose of our semester summary was simply for you, the student, to take a minute, go through every lesson, every concert, every guest artist, every gig, and take a big rake and figure out exactly what you've learned and what you overcame, and the result of that 16 weeks of very, very hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And inevitably, the student would look at that semester summary and go, wow, I did a lot of stuff.
Right.
I forgot what we did in week 2 or 3. Oh, yeah, that combo concert was a good one. Or, ooh, that big band. Yeah, I dragged there and I wasn't using my cymbals right or whatever. So the semester summary was just, again, I could write out a semester report for you guys. That's not it. You write the report out. You tell me what you learned. Then we'll review the report together. And if you missed anything, I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was a valuable tool, and I've told it to other teachers like John Raymond
Yeah.
and other teachers, and they all love the idea of just that end of semester uh, complete analyzation of what you worked on.
Mm-hmm.
But and it also, the result of that is to come up with new goals.
Yeah.
New goals, and you guys, you achieved a lot of goals every semester, but I'm more interested now in where are you going from here? What are your new goals? And how are you going to set the table for the next 5 months?
Yeah.
And as you get to the end of your time at a university, then the idea is, okay, now how are you going to set the table for your career
Mm-hmm.
and your life? So now we start talking about different things.
Right.
So,
Well, okay, and so that leads me to think this is something I wanted to bring up for sure. So you taught at a university for several decades, and I'd be curious to hear your take on things, because especially right now, there's lots of public push for changes to be made at the university level about things like mental health and sexual misconduct and more diversity in faculty, and even just addressing issues on what course loads look like and what things are being emphasized over other things. And I'm interested from your perspective, now that you're retired and you can speak your mind from outside of the system, maybe looking at how the university like experience has changed since you got into it, and then, or even when you went through it, what it was like to be at a university and what it's like now with modern technology and social media and those kinds of pressures. starting there maybe, and then talking about what you would like to see universities change to better serve the students.
That's a heavy question.
Yeah, we'll sift our way through it.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
But yeah, let's do the history first of like how you've seen universities change, just for context for people.
Well, I over my career, I've done well over 1,000 clinics. And those clinics, they're really not drum shop clinics. Those are university clinics where I'll go to a school and stay for 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually have seen, a majority of the schools in the country.
Right.
And around the world. What's always hanging over everyone's head is what are they going to do with the knowledge, and what is the work scene like? So unfortunately, over the past 30, 40 years, the work scene, it's not just going way down. It's always in flex, and it's always changing. And so the biggest thing that I observe with universities is they don't seem to pay close enough attention to the current music scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was certainly true when I went to North Texas, and certainly true when I started teaching at IU. They didn't have a combo program. I mean, what? They didn't have any understanding or any identification of modern music, like fusion music, rock music. So my time at IU, with all the great things that go down there, my time was just trying to make it more modern.
Mm-hmm.
and lay a style like ECM on the school that wasn't taught at all.
Yeah.
And to really focus on rhythm sections / studio music / recording / studio work, all these things that I think are fundamental to making a living. So your question, how has it changed? I'm not sure that it's changed enough in terms of schools changing their curriculum. There are some that have, but it's more than just saying, hey, we got to teach entrepreneurship, or we got to teach pro audio. Those are good things. I'm glad schools are finally embracing that. But I think it's just, I think a music school nowadays really needs to embrace all the musics of the industry and the musics of the world. And you can't just say, we teach world music. Again, it's not that easy. But so I've always hoped that schools take a more wide open view of our business, and which, here's a big point. I consider myself, a jazz musician, but more importantly, I consider myself a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that I've spent my time in the studio doing live gigs, doing award shows, just being a freelance musician.
Right.
I'm not sure that universities take being a freelance jazz or pop or professional musician seriously enough.
Meaning they're more just trying to get people into like orchestra or faculty positions?
Yeah, it boils down to, at a lot of schools, not every school, but it boils down to, okay, we have orchestras.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you get an orchestra gig. Or we have opera. Hope you get an opera gig. Or we have teachers. Go teach percussion somewhere. And in the case of the jazz players, we're not, we're trying to make them good jazz players. But the issue is, what do you what's a good jazz player? My goal with all my students, I think you can attest, was to teach you good fundamental jazz concepts to make you authentic, but it was really more toward making you totally versatile to work in the music business.
Mm.
Read charts, play shows, play Broadway shows, do tours, play some rock things. Oh, you got a country gig? Great. Um, what does that have to do with being a jazz musician? Well, that's not where I'm coming from. I was coming from more being a versatile musician who can work.
Yeah.
So this is the same answer to your question. I think schools over the past 30 or 40 years, they've never really aligned themselves with being a working musician, except for a handful of schools.
Mm-hmm.
And now, over the last 10, 15 years, social media and technology has reared its head. So, good luck. Now it's an arms race, and I think an effective school needs to really have people who can deliver and throw down on that.
Yeah.
I had students who can throw down on that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not my specialty. All of that. So maybe, and it should be this way. And this is the final answer to your question.
Okay.
I think music faculties need to get younger,
Mm-hmm.
to obviously communicate and hang with the students who are coming in. And they also need to be very adept at the social media, technology, home recording, home video, all of those things, because that, to me, if a music school addresses that, that's the new paradigm.
I think, yeah, part of the struggle, it seems like, with updating and addressing issues with like music curriculums is that they're already so oversaturated, and music students are
Yes,
taking like 17 to 23 credit hours a semester and then expected to practice as much as possible on top of that. And
ridiculous.
what things do you think are being overemphasized in general that could be condensed so that there's room for more diversity in the classes that students like just have time to take?
That's easy. That's an easy one. You lived it. I would take out an inordinate amount of time, an inordinate amount of time of music theory, classical music theory, and years of classical music history. I would eliminate at least half of that for uh, a student who wants to pursue jazz and commercial music. It's just not relevant. And plus, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So if you take that, that's 30 credits. We've been fighting this at the school for all these years. How to break away some of those credits so we can plug in pro audio, studio, live playing workshop, video skills, social media skills, marketing, all the things that you personally are living right now.
Right.
You've had to work on all those skills very hard the past 2 or 3 years. Well, I think the school should be generating those skills, but they got to take something away. They have to take away a lot of that, Western music stuff, and replace some of that theory with modern theory in terms of jazz harmony, pop theory, pop harmony, Brazilian harmony, all the harmony that the students are hearing on recordings. We're not necessarily teaching that. And
Yeah.
I'd sure like to thin out the curriculum and replace it with more user-friendly items. But then you come up with, and we lived it, comes up with territorial. It gets, at any university, it comes up where, oh man, you're going to take that away. Well, what does that do to our department?
Because
Well,
they're like getting money because they have everyone in that class.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they got 5-10 people on their faculty. If those classes start shrinking, what happens? And what happens to their AIs, for example? They got 10 AIs. If they don't need 10 AIs, you can see how they get very protective.
Right.
It's understandable, but it's at the same time, it's a little unfortunate that the student can't get exactly what they need for their career. I mean, that's why a vocational school like a Berkeley and some of those, they can kind of more boutique fit their curriculum.
Right. Okay.
But at a Berkeley or a PIT, what you're lacking is what an IU does give you, which is lots of musicians, great facilities, lots of playing opportunities, a real academic setting. So those are all really valuable. But the one, and you mentioned it, the one overall concern of students is I just don't have time to practice and work on things I want to work on.
Yeah.
That's up to the university. It's up to the school to make that a reality where you do have enough time to do what you want to do.
And yeah, like that difference, I feel like at IU, there is, and maybe it's just because it's a small town, I felt like one of the biggest bonuses and benefits I got was having so much consistent time with professors and like building those mentor relationships.
Absolutely.
And are you concerned with, I might be off on this, but it seems like there's a trend, and this is probably just with people trying to get people in these faculty positions, but they can't afford full-time faculty and just budget restraints in general, a ton of adjunct and visiting faculty.
Yeah, you got it. I don't have to say a word. Yeah, that's what's going on, and sometimes I call that phantom faculty,
Mm-hmm.
where, oh yeah, I this guy teaches there. Well, he's on their roster, but he's going to be on tour for 6 months,
Yeah.
so you won't see him. So yeah, that's happened over the past 20 years for
Mm-hmm.
sure,
Or
and
even,
that's unfortunate.
yeah, or even it's like, oh well, we have a professor who does whatever, like maybe it's like a music business thing, but they're just there kind of part time and they do one class or whatever. Um, I guess I felt like for me, music school was the right decision and super valuable because I grew up without having access to masters in the music that I wanted to play. So it was a chance to just be indoctrinated in that community and have like a very organic amount of time to grow real mentor relationships. Um, and sometimes it seems like, and I've even seen people advertise for like, oh, I have like mentorship programs online that you can sign up for and stuff. Um, and I feel like it, like you need the time and the atmosphere of like growing at a university to really solidify that. And I feel like I don't know how you get that thing when you don't, as you put it, like you don't have boots on the ground. Like faculty aren't there on campus for you to get coffee with or to come to your gigs and to understand, like, because sometimes I feel like those visiting faculty are the ones who always have to ask what your name is again, or like keep giving you the same lesson over and over again because their priority isn't the school, because if it was, they'd spend more time there.
Yeah, again, you have it totally sussed out. That's exactly right. And and the mentorship, you know, I've never seen mentorship as just being um, giving someone advice.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the whole thing is watching them in action and and helping guide them with their decision making. But you don't know their decision making till you're there, seeing it, hearing it.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm very proud of the work we've done. I think we have we had some wonderful teachers who did serve as mentors, and they took it very seriously.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the bonus of a college situation that really has boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, some of the coastal schools with some of the bigger names and this and that, that's just not how they're set up, and it works differently.
Yeah.
So, as I always tell students who come and look at a school like IU, just make sure that your teacher is actually there. and
Yeah.
and personally speaking, I was there, and I'm sure some of the students got sick of me being there, but I was there, and I heard almost every gig and every cymbal hit and
Mhm.
every drum tuning and every butchering of a song or what whatever.
You were there
But
for the good stuff and the bad stuff.
yeah, and that was the gig, and I
Yeah.
loved it. I loved it, and the joy is when you have a student who's graduated who said, "I remember, man, that really helped," or
Mhm.
and that's it. That's the only reason we do it. It's the only reason I do it.
Yeah.
But all of your analysis is totally on the money.
Well, okay, I'm glad I'm not misjudging that one.
No.
To follow up on that, just maybe talking about the teacher or mentor and student relationship more. How do you think about it? Because I know okay, so like instance Spyro, when he's talked about it, like him going to Cuba and being mentored, it was like you just follow that person around and live with them and like go, like if they need you to go to the store and get stuff, you go do it. Very much like I'm just your understudy kind of old school thing, which I think is really cool, but maybe hard to recreate in a university. Maybe for there's probably good things about that, but like the there's a certain amount of like professionalism and red tape involved in a university setting. So how do you approach maybe drawing the line between like a professional relationship and being very personally involved in the student? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, Spyro used to call it wax on, wax off,
Yeah.
where, yeah, but that's his whole thing of the elders.
Hmm.
And he takes that very seriously, as he should. And that music that Spyro lived in and lives in, that's all about the elders and who came before and the history. And so that's how he teaches. Um, I mean, I don't do that. They don't have to come to my gigs. They don't have to schlep my gear. I pay for every cartage
Hmm.
that I do.
I can confirm.
But what I do, and Spyro and I have actually talked about this, it is strange that the students, as they get on in time, they don't ever go to your gigs, and they don't listen. They don't listen to their professor perform enough.
Hmm.
Now, that's not all students, but a lot of students. And you can sit at a gig at even like Bears, and you can count, oh, there's 2 students here. Not my students, but there's 2 students. And it's like, I've never quite understood why, especially since it's a small town and everything's cheap, why the students don't partake of more of the performances, whether they like the music or not. They'll learn something.
Yeah.
And Spyro, I know, Michael, that used to drive him crazy because he when he would play with his group Rhythmos, there was just not enough students there. And it was funny, when he left town, he announced his retirement. All of a sudden, everyone's showing up at the jam sessions at the very end.
Yeah.
So, how do I bridge the gap? Well, I do take a, I don't want to call it personal, but I take a personal approach in your success. Meaning, if you find success, it's going to be really good. It'll make me thrilled to see someone have success. So does that just mean a lesson a week will guarantee that? For me, it doesn't. It means that if you want to find a new cymbal sound, I'm going to throw every cymbal I have at you so you can experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do everything that I can do to ensure your success in my own way.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, it's generally, it goes far beyond the lesson. My teaching doesn't stop there. It generally goes into gigs, decision making, symbol usage, and if that's too much for students, if they don't want that, that's kind of what they get with me.
Right.
And you don't have to take all my advice, but it's there, and you don't have to like every symbol I suggest, but it's there if you want it.
Right.
So I don't know if you call that personal, but I do take stock of all my students, and I try to give the individual what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And over time, I've had a lot of great students' successes who are working, and that's really the bottom line. Are my students working? And the answer is, oh yeah, they're working, and they're good people. Yeah. They're good people, and they're smart people. So
I like it. I'm I'm just curious now, over the decades, I mean, people like to throw around the phrase like, especially when you're doing an art field, like, oh, I've never worked a day in my life because it's like not work, which I think I hate that. I feel like it makes you feel bad for like struggling with this, you know? Um, but I have to imagine there have been times through the decades where, I mean, talking about happiness on the podcast, like you've been conflicted about like just what your relationship with music is like, or like the value you're getting out of it. And at those times, like how have you addressed it, or what have you done to revitalize or revamp your connection with the music?
Good. That's a great question. I think students oftentimes are so concerned with how they play and how they sound and where they stack up at school that that's their life.
Yeah, there's like a hierarchy of like, okay, well, I'm better at this person at this thing, but they're better than me at this, but I still think I stand at like this overall level in the program. And that's most of what we think about.
Yeah, and that's not just IU, that's probably every college in America. But I think for me, there's certainly highs and lows in anyone's career. I had some success early on, right out of college. I got with Woody Herman.
Right.
So it was a cool gig, but it was also a real confidence builder. So that got me off and running. So I wasn't struggling right from the beginning, and I didn't have to flip burgers or, you know, just do any kind of jobs like that in the beginning. But then that doesn't go on forever. Then you get off the road and you go into a community. Like for me, it was well, there was New York for 2 weeks, but
yeah,
we won't do there. But then there was Dallas for 4 or 5 years. So I had to figure out how to survive in Dallas. And you know, was I driven by music, and was I driven? I read Brendan's article, driven about my contribution. No, I was driven by making a living and sounding really good whenever I played.
Yeah.
And when I went into the studio, I was driven by, wow, how can I get that studio sound? So I worked very hard on being a good studio player. And when I played in a big band once a week, I tried to be Mel Lewis. And when I had a fusion group, I was really trying to expand my fusion chops. So all those aren't money related, they're just activities. But I found out in my life in Dallas that the more things I got going, the more irons in the fire, that really helped me get through the highs and lows of the music business. And because I wasn't just, oh man, I got to be the next this or that, or oh man, I really want to contribute, or I just want to be a jazz musician. It was none of that. My goal was to be a great musician and have guys respect me and sound good whenever I played. But then that's when the teaching, I taught a lot in Dallas. I taught at a community college. I taught some private lessons. All of those are part of my mosaic in terms of not only survival, but getting over the highs and the lows. Yeah. When I lived in LA, LA's tough. And there were a lot of guys out there doing a lot of studio work, more than me. And it was a bummer. It's like, shit, man, I can do that. But that's not quite how the business works. And so you have to have these other opportunities and these other things that just carry this timeline where you get through these highs and the lows that you described. I never stopped loving music, but there were times where I was teaching more than playing. I never stopped loving and playing jazz trio. I mean, that's my all-time favorite. And so But are my expectations to have the best jazz trio ever in the world? No. It's just to play with good guys and have a great time playing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I must say, over time, I just want to play with my friends now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I want to hit that for sure. What I wanted to say before, it definitely sounds like when you reference the guest article that Brendan Keller-Tuberg wrote, who is one of my roommates at IU, an exchange student from Australia, and he talks in that about something I think a lot of us of our age are just thinking about, which is our contribution or just like our purpose in music and trying to figure out what that is. And I feel like that is often more centered these days around like a certain project or like a vision that you're working towards, for instance, like this podcast. Um, and maybe I just think that that might be a result of the musical opportunities at the time. For instance, like there aren't big bands taking students out of colleges anymore, you know? And like studio work is a lot of it is different and from home. And it it sounds like your version of fulfillment was through a variety of work that even if it wasn't your thing, you were committed to doing it at a really high level, and that feeling of achievement and that small victory, right,
Yep.
is what you was driving you going forward. And it I guess my experience so far um, has been that because there aren't necessarily as many opportunities, and I just think it seems like there's more musicians than ever. I feel like there's more pressure to find your niche and like the thing that you really feel is meaningful to you and seeing that through.
Yeah. And I would agree with everything you said, but I would say, I would caution you that your niche might not playing, might not totally be playing drum set with the music you love.
Mm,
Excuse me. That's part of your niche. But I think your niche, personally, your niche is podcasts, blogs, communication, and weaving the music you like through all that. So you just spread out your, if we want to call it your purpose,
mm-hmm.
your purpose is not to be a drummer playing your music. I think that's one of your purposes. But I think there's a chance, if that's your only purpose, there's a chance for that to kind of blow up in your face
Mm,
in today's climate.
yeah.
And I think, you know, when I see a guy who has video skills, audio skills, writing skills, I mean text writing, narrative skills, creative skills, entrepreneurial skills, and has a musical voice to boot. To me, that's the kind of formula that I think is going to carry the new musician through the hard times and the good times.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, one of those is going to spill out where you're going to spend more time in that area than the other. We'd all like it to be the playing side because that's where we all started. And hopefully, God willing, that's it ends up where you're playing every night and playing music you dig every night.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's a matter of throwing a lot of things on the wall and nurturing all these other things that are only inherent to you personally.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like that. The idea that the thing that you're doing, that like your passion project or the thing that's meaningful for you, could take more forms than you currently realize. Like you could still use that thing, but it could show itself in different ways, which is cool.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word project now a couple times. I'm project driven,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, and this is a great point. Projects, I think, seem to be a part of every musician's makeup, every successful musician, and you got to have projects. If you don't have projects, you have nothing to hang your hat on, and then you end up losing any small victories that may occur. for me, my projects are my books.
Mm-hmm.
So when I have a book that I'm working on, man, I put a lot of energy. And then when I complete the book and the people like the book, it's cool. Well, I got to write another book. And when I do a CD, these old things that are circular,
Yeah.
a
Right.
CD, there's nothing like it, whether it sells one CD or gets one download. The fact of doing a project, it envelops your brain, your artistry, your entrepreneurship, and it consumes a couple months of your life in a very good way.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't make a dime off of it, I know you did your record. I don't know if you sold 1,000 records, but I know I know that recording, you were very proud of it, and you worked very hard on it. So imagine your life being filled with projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
That's what it needs to be.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I especially feel like that couples super powerfully with what you said is like, you just want to play with your friends now,
Absolutely.
and just starting projects with your friends instead of this idea of like networking so that you get called for gigs with like these older established musicians, because those people just want to play with their friends. Like they don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess I feel like that is one of my biggest critiques or wishes for the university, is that I feel like they could prioritize student projects more. Whereas I feel like
Agreed.
the only one for the most part is like your recital. But I still think there's this commitment to turning you into a musician who is like, okay, well, you have everything necessary to get a job in an established institution, whether that be as a faculty member or an orchestra or like a big band or something. But those opportunities, I mean, people are living longer, holding those chairs for longer. There just aren't that many. And it's weird to double down on that commitment rather than giving people resources and dedicating class time to developing these projects,
Again, about your 10th comment that I've agreed totally with.
Cool.
Yeah, it's right on. And I'm happy to say that as I was leaving the school last
There's
year,
a lot of that.
There's these discussions in the curriculum to have they call them capstone project.
Okay.
For a student, besides the recital,
Mm-hmm.
to do that. So maybe it's headed in that direction, but I couldn't agree more. And that's why personally, I try to make my studio available for video projects. I was constantly telling the students, record video, and yeah, I wish there was more of that in university for sure. But if you look at these players out there, when I was younger, of course, I wanted to play with Bill Evans.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get to sit in with him at the Vanguard for a set. So
that sounds amazing.
Well, it was amazing, and it was probably a little scary, but then as years go by, Bill's gone, but there are other great musicians, great trios. But Keith Jarrett's found his guy in Jack, God knows how many years ago. Mm-hmm. They love to play together.
Yeah.
Walter Smith, he loves playing with his Houston guys because he went to school with them, and they end up being heavy guys. But it's like Eric. He and Eric, they're school buddies.
Yeah.
So I love that he plays with more than that, but at the bottom line, these guys end up with their friends.
Yeah. Well, doesn't it seem...
Yeah, and so at this point, it's not that I don't want to play with other people. That's not true at all. If I was looking for a gig with Randy Brecker, that got canceled because of the pandemic.
Okay.
But then that would have been cool. But there's There's a side, you're a side man for a gig. Fantastic. That's what we do. But, you know, I also enjoy my ex-brother-in-law, Clay Jenkins,
Mm-hmm.
who I've recorded with a lot. I'd go into the studio tomorrow to record with him
Yeah.
because it's comfortable. It's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable.
Well, yeah, and I guess to follow up on that, on like the jazz side, there's so much emphasis put on like, here's how you can play a tune without knowing the other band. Like, here's how you can throw down on a random set of chord changes at a jam session, you know? This really impersonal approach to like, that is really useful because there are plenty of gigs you get called for where you don't know the people and you don't know the rep and you just got to play still. Like, I understand the value for sure, but it seems like that's like the entire idea is just turning you into this person who can do these anonymous hits with anonymous people. And I just think it would be so cool to, on like a institutional level, reinforce the idea that it's about the people you're playing with. It's not about the notes, and to really value that, because I know like some of my friends I went to school with, I write music for now, thinking in the future, like I will ask them to play on this record because I want to
Yeah.
hear like that person play it.
Yeah.
And in general, it just makes it like on the bandstand and like the working scene, sometimes it just feels like that mentality of it being anonymous and just us playing these collections of notes together is more important than like building a connection on an individual level and like playing with your friends. And it just bums me out sometimes. And I also feel like the most provocative stuff and moving performances I ever see are with friends. Or even if you look at the history of like this music, like the bebop musicians were like were at the same house working at night and day together. That was a collection. Same with like Miles's bands and stuff. And even now with Ambrose and Walter, and like there are all these generations of friends who came up with their own thing that shaped the direction of the music, you know?
Yeah. No, again, that's a true statement. But it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Um, if you want to play in the jazz world and play gigs, you got to know tunes. So there's that. So you can't play jazz gigs if you don't know tunes.
Right.
Just like you can't do a top 40 gig if you don't know the latest hits. You'll sound like a fool. So there is that. So now, do you have to play this tune like anybody before you? I think there's some leeway there. The way I play Cherokee will be different than someone else. But if you remember the W's that we talked about quite a bit, this is the crux of your statement, I think. Who, what, when, where, why. So if I try to copy this drummer on this recording for this tune, and I try to take what I heard and go play that across the street at Bears at a little jazz club with the guys I would play with, it's not going to work, because it's not the same bass player, not the same piano player. It's not the jazz standard in New York. It's Bears, in Bloomington.
Yeah.
And it's the who, what, when, where, why, which is a fancy way of saying know what you're playing, who you're playing with, when you're playing it, all those things. So, the last part of your statement was the most compelling stuff is with my friends where we know each other and it feels really good. And I say, absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But if you're going to be a sideman jazz musician, you got to know tunes, not just swing tunes. You got to know tunes. You got to sound authentic. And then you have to be the kind of musician where you can adapt that tune to these players.
Right.
That's the who and the what.
I guess I like that version we're talking about listening now, which comes up all the time. And I feel like it's given a really shallow definition of just like taking in the immediate note information and then deciding what cool thing you can play because you heard that. But I like that you are applying it to a more general, like it's almost coming back to the beginning, like concepts. Like what is this bass player's concept? Where are they coming from a historical perspective? And same with like the other members of the band. And I guess I like that because it feels like you're applying like individuality to them and like human aspects of like who are the people that they're emulating and these bigger things. And I guess I always like it when it becomes more than the notes and you're giving value to the people behind them. And I guess I feel like that's what listening is like giving value to the other people in the band, not necessarily hearing. It's not just about hearing the notes that they're playing.
No, you said that quite a bit, hearing the notes that they're playing. That's just a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
But like one of my students, Greg, he was looking at the tune Stablemates.
Yeah.
And so I sent him a nice version. And so he tried to play it like that guy. Then I sent him another version, which was way out there. And then I sent him another version, which was way out there again.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end, it was like, holy crap, it's not even the same tune. Precisely.
Yeah.
There's the tune, then there's the band, and then there's the bass player and the soloists. So how you can say, well, the notes I played on Stablemates, I'm going to try this idea. That's a failed concept. I think when you're teaching improvisation, you certainly have to figure out a way to navigate through chord changes. But in our world as a rhythm player, you got bigger fish to fry.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make the whole band sound good. You have to work with that bass player and then not think about it. And then you have to create that dynamic hookup with the piano and then not think about it. And then you have to make the soloist sound better. So you can only do that on the bandstand. You can't practice all those things I just said outside of the bandstand.
Yeah.
I can listen to a great recording and pick up elements of what I heard, and maybe some of it will transfer. I doubt it. But I'll know the song.
Yeah.
I'll know the song, and then I'll adapt the song to these players.
Right. Well, I like that a means to an end. The end goal is like connecting as people and making something happen. But you do, I guess, and the thing I do admit and will keep in mind is that you do have to have a mastery over the notes in order to get to that end. But I think sometimes you get so focused on the notes that you forget that they aren't the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to share all this. I don't know if there's anything else that you feel like we haven't hit yet that you think is stuff that you really want to share just about happiness or getting through this field with your sanity.
Well, it's quite the challenge, I think, with the pandemic and where that's put the music business. Mm-hmm. So I certainly wish everybody good luck. I don't think it's dire, but I think when it opens up, you have to be ready. You have to be ready with where you're going to plant your flag, or ready with a concept, a little bit about what we talked about earlier. Is your concept just playing the drums, or by now has your concept grown to be 2 or 3 things? Mm-hmm. And then as the playing the drums starts to grow, then life is good. But I think everybody coming out of this pandemic has to really think about how how they can, well, I don't want to just say survive, but how they can really thrive and keep inspired. And I think the answer might be to just throw it out there and do more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
More than
Get some
one
projects, get some concepts.
Projects.
Yeah.
However, if anyone is not spending the last 8 months wisely, i.e., learning tunes, learning styles, sharpen reading skills, sharpen all of your concepts. Those are just kind of boilerplate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If they haven't used their time wisely doing all those things, short of playing on a bandstand, then perhaps they better spend the next 3 or 4 months just making sure that when the doors come open, that you are ready to go.
That'll do it for this episode of the Happy Musicians Podcast. There are 2 featured tracks. The first one, the one we're listening to right now, is entitled Harmony 56, and that's off a record Bahad, which is Rusty Burge on vibraphone, Steve Ali on piano, Steve Houghton on drums, Jeremy Allen on bass, and Rob Dixon, who wrote the tune, on saxophone. The intermission tune was entitled Ebony, and that's from the Steve Houghton trio record A Beautiful Friendship, with Steve Ali, again on piano, who wrote that tune, and Bob Bowman on bass. There are links to those and everything else mentioned in the episode at thehappymusicians.com. If you go there, you'll also find fun blog posts and additional resources that are entertaining and informative and valuable. I'm really proud of it, and I hope you'll check it out. There's also a newsletter you can subscribe to on there, which is hassle-free, spam-free, and the most genuine way for me to interact with you all and let you know about the content I'm putting out on my own terms without having to rely on an algorithm that manipulates and spies on you. And I think that's better. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you for taking the time and attention to listen to this. It means a lot. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts if you can. It's free and fast and wildly helpful. Thanks again. Hope to see you next time. And until then, stay happy.